Hi, folks. Welcome to episode 2 of The No Normal. I'm your host, Richie O Connell. Today we'll be talking to BARBA Baker, a Canadian writer. I came across her when I read her blog, My Antidepressants, which I found very witty, insightful. And that's really the kind of stuff we love here at The No Normal, the same kind of thing we're trying to do, which is to show that depressed people are a lot more than just their ailment. They can be funny, witty, and very self-reflective about their condition. So because of the time difference, this will be a slightly different format. It won't be a live chat, but I'll be giving you the questions that I pose to her and her videos responses you'll see as well. So let's get started. Hello, Barbara. Welcome to The No Normal. Thank you very much for chatting with us. Firstly, I started The No Normal because I thought it was very important that people speak openly and unashamedly, frankly, about their issues and their experiences with mental illness. It doesn't ever to remove the stigma and show that it affects people from all walks of life. What inspired you to start chronicling your experiences in My Antidepressants?
Well, first off, I love writing. I would write little notes in my phone kind of about my experiences, and I just kept having these thoughts like, I want to share this. I think because the recovery narratives I read, I never personally related to. I didn't think I was sick enough, or even when I was trying to recover, like I didn't like wholeheartedly believe in it. I was like taking a step into the unknown, and I think a lot of recovery narratives are written with that 2020 hindsight of, yes, look how things got better, but when you're getting into recovery with mental health, you really don't know, and you may be skeptical. I certainly was. I didn't really think it was going to work. I couldn't see a place where I would be better, and I kind of wanted to touch on like being skeptical, not being sure if it's going to work, and then doing it anyways, which I think is a much more realistic narrative. So I just kind of felt I had a different perspective, and I want to share that for people who maybe are skeptical or cynical like me, but that those people can be happy too.
I certainly identify and understand the cynicism when you're first seeking treatment, and the very concept of seeking treatment, the apprehensiveness about it. Kind of cynicism naturally goes hand in hand with depression, so naturally that is an obstacle, aside from the stigma that society puts on people that go seeking mental health and admit they have problems. We do have to get over that our own cynicism, which is obviously inherent in people that are depressed and may have like a kind of darker outlook on things, and not particularly hopeful outlook. One thing that struck me about your blog is the same thing. The thing I liked about it, we like to have a bit of humor and a bit of fun here at The No Normal too, and I really enjoyed that there was, as well as being insightful and very self-reflective and informative, it was very witty. And I just wanted to ask you, do you think your humor helps you deal with your mental problems, any issues that you may experience?
Yeah, I kind of think humor with depression is a bit of a double-edged sword. I think when my friends and family were first concerned for me, I would use humor to deflect from my issues. I kind of thought, well, if I can joke about it, I must not actually be depressed, right? I think I wasn't being honest and really like looking at my problems head on. But on the other hand, I think humor is a really powerful tool. Humor is what makes you relatable. You can kind of cross that bridge and connect with others, which lots of the times is difficult for depressed people. So really anything that can get you to connect is really powerful. Yeah, and I think that it's kind of that idea, but more honest. Like, yes, I admit I have problems, but I can joke about them so they hold less power over me, which I think is a really powerful way to look at it, but it just really depends.
Yeah, I can certainly see how humor, it is a very helpful thing. It does help you kind of put your issues and your problems in perspective, make them more manageable. If you can laugh at them, it kind of makes them hold less power over you. But it definitely is, especially early on, when you may not have fully admitted to yourself that you have issues. It is a form of deflection. When people may ask you if there's anything going on with you, you can just laugh it off and make jokes about it. So that's something to watch out for too and be aware of. Could you tell us a little bit about self-care, the concept of it? Because on your blog, you were definitely a bit cynical about it at first, but it seems that you did come around to the idea. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, when my therapist first suggested self-care, I was completely skeptical. Up until that point, I've been kind of doing the exact opposite. I've been doing anything to numb out. So I was cutting, I was drinking, I wasn't eating. So I really wasn't trying to experience things through my body and through my emotions. But by that point, the things I was doing weren't working. So I kind of thought, okay, I'll try it. I was skeptical, and I kind of made a half-assed attempt. She told me to write a list of things I could do for self-care, and I copied one from the internet. But yeah, I tried some things on there, and I think after repeatedly doing that, it becomes hard to reconcile these activities where you purposely take care of yourself with the self-destructive behaviors that you're doing. It just doesn't make sense anymore to do these things that purposely hurt you when you're taking care of yourself. And I think it's paradigm shifting to go from having no regard to yourself to saying, hey, like, I'm doing these things that show I am important. So I think it's important to just try. And yeah, slowly your thoughts towards yourself will change. And you start to realize I am something worth taking care of just by repeatedly taking care of yourself. And I think that's where the big shift was for me, for sure. So yeah, now I believe in self-care. Even when I really don't want to do it or don't think I deserve it, I do it anyways. And it even has a benefit if you don't believe in it. So if you really don't believe in it, I would still say just try. And see what happens. It's kind of one of those fake it till you make it experiences. Yeah,
that was very interesting. I never really heard much about the concept of self-care. It hasn't really been a part of my treatment. So it was very interesting to hear your perspective. Could you tell us a little bit more about your journey towards seeking treatment in the first place? Like what brought you to that point?
I think the biggest thing for me with treatment was admitting to myself I had a problem and talking to other people about it, because I did seek professional help pretty early on. I first saw an eating disorder specialist when I was 17, but I just wasn't honest with myself. I wanted to be out of there as quick as possible, and it was like skeptical of her. I didn't really fully believe myself I had a problem, so I wasn't ready to fix it. So I think the biggest thing that you can do is accept it and start talking with other people. I think unless you do that, any treatment you get, it will be hard to make progress because you aren't 100% committed. So I think when I really finally reached out and said, hey, like, I do have these things, I accept them, and now I'm willing to work on them, that was a big turning point for me. Because when I was 17, I had an eating disorder specialist, but I just got worse and worse, and then was referred to a hospital program, and I went there the first day, and I just didn't want to do it. I looked at all these other people who had eating disorders, and how it had wrecked everyone else's life, and I just didn't want to fit with that group. I didn't want to identify with these people who had eating disorders. And I think that kind of really held me back because I was still in denial about everything. And I spent years still suffering. And when I finally admitted something was wrong, that's when I really first made a change.
Yeah, it's certainly true that it's one thing for mental health professionals to get involved earlier on, but you really need to engage in the process as well, as you've learned from your experience. You really do have to take part, and you really do need to want to get help. So that is very important to realize as well. You also speak of a dissonance between realizing that between your own problems and your own awareness of mental illness as a social issue, because you say you really do recognize it as a social issue, but it took you a long time to accept, and you found it very difficult to accept that you may have a problem too. Why do you think that is? That it is a lot easier for people to kind of recognize mental illness as a societal issue, and may recognize it in other people, but it's very hard to kind of come to terms with you having issues yourself.
This is common when we're dealing with self-perception. It's kind of that thing like you don't care what your friends look like, but you have a pimple on your face and you're mortified. Or I don't know, your friends make a mistake and you laugh about it, but you make that same mistake and you're so embarrassed. And I think then it also is just dealing with an issue in reality when it becomes personal is so much more difficult than dealing with an issue in theory. I think it's a lot easier to say like, oh yeah, I support that when it doesn't actually have to do with you. But confronting your own problems can be a lot scarier and harder to admit. So I basically started admitting my problems because I didn't want to be a hypocrite. I felt a lot of guilt around being so silent about my own issues when I wanted other people to be able to be honest. So that's kind of what changed for me. I was like, I don't want to be secretive anymore because I don't want someone to see me and think, oh, she can't talk about her issues, so I can't either. That was kind of the change for me, but that's a really hard place to get to. I think just because we're always so much harder on ourselves. We're always our biggest critic. And I just think that's kind of like a characteristic of being human. You know, you think your issues are so important. We're like self-centered. That's just the way we perceive the world. So when it comes to dealing with our own issues, it becomes a lot harder. But I think that's when the real work can start and you can really make a difference is when you're confronted with these issues yourself.
Yeah, self-reflection is definitely a very difficult thing to achieve. It is much easier to look at things objectively. It's very hard to objectively kind of look at your own problems. So that is another hurdle towards seeking treatment. Another thing I wanted to talk about is you mentioned some of your experiences in your blog. With alcohol, I found that for a short time, I gave up alcohol when, early on when I started getting treatment. Not just because of the way it mixed with medication, but because depression itself, as you be aware, is ups and downs. And alcohol I found exacerbated that. And my lows would be lower and my highs would be a bit higher. Do you think, with your experiences of alcohol, do you think it should be avoided or taken in moderation, especially early on when you're seeking treatment?
Yeah, I definitely learned the hard way that alcohol is a depressant. I mean, I think combining a substance that lessens your decision-making skills while being in such a dark place emotionally can have some really negative consequences. I know for me, I had a few issues with self-harm while I was drunk. And I'm lucky that I have friends around me, but I definitely could have taken it too far. I remember not really knowing what I was doing. And I think like a lot of suicides do happen under the influence. And I think that's for a reason. I think because you go to such a dark place, it really does exacerbate those low feelings you have. So I would just caution anyone who think they might be depressed, if you can, to lessen your alcohol intake until you're in a better, more secure headspace. And I think if you're dependent on alcohol and that's not possible, I think that is another issue or a sign of concern. I would reach out for help just because you can really do something you would regret. And I regretted those instances I had. It just was like the combination of already being in that dark place and then taking it too far.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree. I think earlier on in the process, it is good to avoid alcohol, moderate your intake and intake of other drugs perhaps, because that's while you come to terms and you try and sort your own head out and start dealing with your problems early in the process. I just want to talk a little bit about what the perception of mental illness is in Canada, because in Ireland, there is kind of a movement now to make people aware of depression as an issue, but I think there's still a long way to go in helping people understand it, realize that it's not always obvious. It affects people from all different walks of life. People who are depressed generally hide it well a lot of the time. They're not always moping about or crying into their hands or having breakdowns in the street. I mean, because there is kind of still a social stigma, people do hide it well, they don't broadcast it. So that's how I feel it's like in Ireland. Could you tell us a little bit about perceptions in Canada?
Yeah, from what I've experienced, I think we're moving away from complete ignorance about it. And I do think people genuinely want to understand, but I think mental health is kind of shrouded in a lot of confusion for people. I think we have these stereotypes, which can be just as dangerous as complete ignorance, because I think with these stereotypes, if you don't exactly fit by what your perception is of a mental illness, you might not reach out and seek the help that you need. I know for me, I was so self-critical. I was like, nothing's wrong, like you're really not depressed because you don't fit into the stereotype. You still go to school, you still do this and that. So I think it's dangerous. And especially with eating disorders, we have this perception of this frail, thin girl, and that's just not true. The majority of people suffering with eating disorders will be normal weight, or they may be overweight. It's very rare that you actually have such a sickly looking person from the outside, but it doesn't mean that person isn't suffering with mental and physical health problems. As eating disorders basically just wreak havoc on your body. So I think now we need to work. We've got that awareness. People know at least vaguely about mental illness, but I think we really need to open that discussion and start talking about the real lived experiences people have rather than just stereotypes.
Thank you very much for chatting with us, Barbara. It was very informative. Are there any other thoughts you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Thank you so much for having me. What you're doing is honestly amazing. And I think if anyone else wants to connect about mental health, I started my blog to also learn from other people. I don't want it to just be about my experiences. So feel free to connect with me by email, on Instagram, or on my website, which is myantidepressants.com. And I would really love to hear from you. But thanks again.
Thanks very much, Barbara, for the chat. I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it informative. If you haven't seen the first episode, please check it out, where I talked to Colette Ford. And definitely check out Barbara Baker's blog, myantidepressants.com. It's very witty, insightful, and if you enjoyed The No Normal, you would definitely enjoy reading her blog. It's terrific. Take care. Hope you enjoyed this show, and see you next time.